According to a Moraine Library article called Betting on Sports of October 28, 2016, nearly two-thirds of Americans have gambled in their lifetime, which is roughly 215 million Americans. And according to my class survey, where out of the 16 individuals I had asked to take my survey, it resulted in showing that only 4 individuals do gamble on sports, which simplified is 1 in 4 people in this class gamble on sports. Today I will be informing the class on the dangers of sports gambling and ultimately persuade the class into not gambling on sports. My credibility is I have read numerous articles that inform the readers on the harm that sports gambling can cause to an individual, and myself included have suffered from sports gambling. The reason you should care and be aware of this topic is because it may not be a battle you fight, but millions of Americans are negatively affected by gambling every single day. To fully understand how sports gambling harms an individual, we must first identify the problem. Next, we can go over the cause to the problem. And finally, we will go over possible solutions in order to overcome the problem. The problem with sports gambling is it can not only harm you financially, but it can harm you psychologically as well. According to an article in the Washington Times newspaper of May 2018, a Georgia State University study discovered that about 50% of problem gamblers commit crimes. Also discovered by a Georgia State University study, approximately 76% of problem gamblers are likely to have major depressive disorder. The Washington Times article also noted that a study conducted in Australia showed that 1 in 5 suicidal patients had a gambling problem. As you can see, gambling can lead to some negative outcomes such as the increase of crime, suicide, and even depression. The cause for people's gambling problems is because of numerous reasons that we will now go over. Gambling in casinos is something that will never go away and never become illegal. It's just one of those things that will only disappear if people begin losing interest in it. But unfortunately, the act of gambling will most likely never stop and never disappear. The Moraine Valley Library provided me an article called Gambling in America that was posted in June of 2012, which states that casinos employed about 3,300,000 people in 2011 and paid roughly $12.9 billion in wages. Even though this seems positive because of the number of jobs that are offered in the casino business, however, the amount of people affected negatively each year by gambling exceeds that number exponentially. The New York Times newspaper did a study in May of 2018 and found that sports bettors accounted for 47% of all minutes viewed. Sports bettors watch about twice as much sports coverage than non-bettors do. We will now go over some common causes for the act of gambling. The number one common factor for a gambling addiction is stress. If you have emotional problems caused by relationship difficulties, or if you are under stress at work or facing financial worries, then gambling often provides temporary relief. But in the long run, it usually only adds to the stress as you lose more money and try to cope with the shame of your addiction, creating a vicious cycle. Another common factor for cause of gambling is filling a void. In many cases, people use gambling as a way of passing time and a chance to be in the company of others. This is often seen with elderly who feel lonely, particularly if they have lost their spouse and their children are not close and have plenty of time on their hands. Another thing that some gamblers live for is the thrill that gambling gives them. There is no doubt that gambling is thrilling and heart-pounding. Some people become so addicted to the adrenaline rush that gambling gives them and become so hooked to that rush. A lot of famous celebrities and multi-million-dollar business owners or entrepreneurs we see today become addicted to the thrill that gambling gives off. I never understood how this can be thrilling for people, but for some, I guess the chance of losing millions of dollars is thrilling to them. Lastly, one of the most common causes for a gambling problem is depression and alcohol. It is estimated that gambling addicts are twice as likely as others to suffer from depression, and that nearly half of gambling addicts also have an alcohol problem. As you are able to see from the information I've just shared with you, the act of gambling does not just have one single cause to it, but is caused from numerous scenarios or actions. Now that we have discussed the causes behind gambling, let's now dive into my third and last main point and talk about some of the possible solutions to stopping or resisting the act of gambling. If you are not gambling yet but think about starting, then good, I have caught you before you get hooked. Since I am talking to the individuals who haven't started gambling yet or have not started to gamble heavily, then really my only advice to you is to not start, period. Because once you start, you cannot stop. Especially if you win the first few times and have a good payout, then that's when you should pull out, because your luck will not always be that good, and you must stop and look at the possible outcomes to gambling and realize that your odds of a negative outcome are more likely than a positive outcome. People of the opposing view may tell you all of the possible potentials you may have if you win, but once again, that is a big fat if you win. It's not guaranteed that you are going to win money, so don't let other people talk you into gambling. If you think it is too late and you are already so deep that it seems impossible to stop gambling, you must know that it is never too late to stop and resist the urge. Just take some time, help, and guidance. Gambling is a drug. It is just as addictive as alcohol and any other addictive substance. There are numerous routes you can take to stopping the urge of gambling, but for most cases, the first step to refusing to gamble is to accept. Like any other addictive drug, you must face a state of acceptance and accept that your addiction has driven you to a low point in your life and has been the cause to your problems. Most people then seek help from someone else, whether it be visiting a counselor or just letting a family member help and guide you to the right direction. Some other options may be rekindling an old hobby that draws your attention away from gambling, or planning your day ahead with things to do that will force you to complete tasks and take your attention away from gambling. What most people seem to do nowadays, but isn't the most healthy route, is they find a new, less addictive and less harming addiction. They do this in hopes of being able to then resist a less addictive addiction. So for example, most smokers stop smoking and switch to binge eating. The reason for this is because most smokers have oral fixation and want something in their mouth. So instead of putting cigarettes in their mouth, they put food in their mouths. For some, this can be a problem, as some people may become obese. If you are an individual who does have a gambling addiction, my best advice for you is to visit ncpgambling.org or call 1-800-522-4700 and seek help. As my speech comes to a close, let's lastly recap on what has been discussed today. We first discussed in the attention getter how many Americans gamble, then followed by the problems it causes for many individuals. Second, we went over the causes behind their addiction, and lastly, we discussed some possible solutions.